Are you having a hard time to set boundaries? Do you feel like you are a people pleaser and people might really like you for this, but you don't really like yourself anymore because you feel like you're losing yourself in the process of all the time pleasing other people while not taking care of yourself? Then today's video is for you. In today's video, we're going to talk about how to set boundaries and stop people pleasing. I'm going to help you identify reasons why it is hard for you to set boundaries. And then I will take you on a journey to learn the rules that are important for you in your life and then how to integrate them into your life in a step-by-step process. So let's get started. Hi, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Julia Arndt and I'm a peak performance coach and stress management trainer. In today's video, we're going to talk about how to set boundaries and stop people pleasing. A super important topic within the peak performance method, a method that I have created in order to help people reach their peak and stay at that peak on a consistent level and on a consistent basis. If you want to learn more about how to reach your peak and how to integrate the peak performance method into your life, make sure that you're checking out my YouTube channel, Julia Arndt, by subscribing to this video and subscribing to my channel. Hit the notification bell in order to make sure that you're receiving updates every time I am posting new content, which is every Monday and every Friday. And I would also really appreciate it if you would give me a thumbs up at the end of the video if you like the video, so I know what you enjoy watching and what I maybe need to shift and change, okay? Okay, so this is already a really good start, but now I really want to dive with you into the topic how to set boundaries and stop people pleasing. Something that I feel like not a lot of us have really learned in our lives, right? We all have learned that we should please other people to make them happy, but we haven't really learned that sometimes we have to say no and sometimes we have to set a really clear boundary in order to protect ourselves. This is the reason number one why we are setting boundaries, because if we are just pleasing people all the time, if you're pleasing other people, if you're saying yes to meetings, if you're saying yes to emails, if you're saying yes to other projects, emergency situations, then you will never have time to take care of yourself. And that is one of the biggest mistakes I see people make when we're talking about reaching peak performance. If you want to learn more about this, I have a podcast episode on exactly that topic, the biggest mistake I see people make in their peak performance skills. So make sure to check that out as well. But what is really important is to really talk about why is it so hard to set boundaries. And I have already mentioned the first two reasons of why it is difficult to set boundaries. We are oftentimes people pleasers, and second of all, we haven't really learned to say no. So we're going to practice that a little bit in today's video today. And I want to give you some insights into how you can start creating your rules and how you can start integrating those into your day-to-day life. But let's talk a little bit longer here about why is it really hard to set boundaries. Sometimes it is hard to set boundaries because we don't really know how to differentiate between something that's really urgent, like an emergency situation, or something that somebody makes an emergency situation all the time. And if we say yes all the time to that emergency situation, then it's not really an emergency situation anymore. You see what I'm saying? So emergency situations versus like, okay, where do I set like a border? Where do I set a boundary, right? Another reason why it might be really difficult to set boundaries is because you don't really like conflict. You don't really like to say no to another person because you are afraid that that person might come back to you and be angry with you. Or you might not really know how to communicate it. So how to communicate effectively that this is a boundary and that, you know, that person is violating your boundary right now. That could be another reason why it is hard for you to set boundaries. And finally, it can also be really difficult to set a boundary because you don't really know how to prioritize. It's really difficult for you to understand, okay, where do I start to be really clear and what is really important for me personally versus what is maybe important to another person, and how to kind of find a more compromise here as well. So a lot of different reasons of why it might be really hard to set boundaries, but don't let that stop you. Just because you have a lot of reasons / maybe aka excuses of why it is hard to set boundaries doesn't mean that you should just keep doing it because that's the easier way to go. And if you are interested to learn a little bit more on how to create powerful habits, I do have a video on that as well, because every time I'm teaching you something new, every time I want you to go away with a new skill, you have to practice that skill. You have to set a goal around it, and then you have to build a habit around it in order to make sure that you're successful with it. So goal setting and habit building, two really, really important topics. Both of them are on my YouTube channel and are videos that you can watch as well. Anyway, so now that you know why you might have difficulties to set boundaries, which is the most important step always, because the very first thing that you need to do is to create awareness. Only then can you move forward and start making changes in your life. And you will learn more about that if you're watching the video on how to create new habits. Awareness is really, really important, and this is exactly what we just did. So identify, why is it hard for you to set a boundary? Why is it difficult? Why are you afraid of? Maybe there's an unhelpful or dysfunctional belief. Maybe your belief system is a little bit challenged. First step is always to create awareness. This is really important. Now you understand why it is hard for you to set boundaries. Identify that reason and identify maybe what kind of unhelpful belief or dysfunctional belief is behind that keeps you from actually starting to be a little bit clearer with your rules. Okay, so now that you have been really clear on why it is that it is hard for you to set boundaries, now we can move into how can I start to set better boundaries, right? This is a really, really important topic if you want to be more productive in your life. It is your life, your boundaries, your rules. And that brings me to the next topic that is really, really important to identify when we're talking about setting boundaries. When you are starting to set boundaries, you need to be really clear on your rules. That is the first important step when we're talking about setting boundaries. What is important to you in your life? We talked a little bit about prioritization earlier, and that this might be really difficult for you because if you don't really know how to prioritize and what to prioritize, of course, it's harder to set a boundary because then we're just saying yes to everything. But once we are clear, once you are clear on your rules, then you will be able to be really, really much clearer on where to say yes and where to say no. So be clear on your rules. This could be, for example, in the work context. When are your working hours? When do you start your workday? When do you end your workday? How many of us are working in the evenings and during the weekends because we have no clear boundaries on when we are actually capable of working, when we want to work, when we are able to work. So be really clear on that. Set that rule for yourself. So work hours could be one of your rules. It could be how you manage your time. When you're starting to be clear on your time, on where you want to create certain time slots and time blocks, then you can be really clear on yes, I have time, and no, I don't have time. If you want to learn more about time management, a really, really powerful topic, please head over to my website. I have a 5-day free time management course on my website that takes you for 5 days through a step-by-step process on how to create better time slots and better time blocks. That is a really, really good training. I really highly encourage you to do it. A lot of people have already taken it and they're really enjoying taking it. So make sure that you check that out. Time management, because once you know your blocks, once you know what is important for you, then you can say no. So this is a rule, right? Okay, here's a time block, for example. During these hours, I am checking my emails. During these hours, I'm working on my projects and I do not accept other meetings. During this time, I am taking a break. During this time or during this evening, I am taking care of myself. I do not have time for other things. But only once you are clear on what these rules are, can you say no and can you start setting boundaries, okay? Let me give you a couple of other examples of what these rules can be, because I know it can be really helpful to hear them, to be like, oh yeah, that should be actually a rule that I should implement into my life, right? So another rule could be, for example, that you only accept meetings once per week in the evenings, because I know a lot of you work with international teams and it's sometimes not so easy to set boundaries and say no, because if we always say no, then we are not able to interact with other people, but we can be more cognizant and more intentional about how we are spending our time. Okay, so I want you to, for example, create a time slot that says once a week I'm going to check in with my team in India, for example, but I'm only making free time for them on Wednesday evenings. Okay, so this could be a rule. It could also be a rule that you say, I am not accepting last minute requests anymore, because maybe for some reason you always get the last minute requests. I wonder why that is. Well, it's probably because you have always said yes to these meetings or to these requests in the past before. And what is really, really powerful to know is that a lack of boundaries creates a lack of respect. So people have learned that you will always say yes. So you need to start creating rules. You have to be really clear with yourself on what it is that you want to set boundaries around before kind of enforcing them, okay? So that is really, really important. So be really clear on your expectations and be really clear on those of others as well. And then when you have that list, when you have the list of things that are really important for you, your rules, then you can start to enforce your boundaries. Okay, so now that you have your list of rules, and by the way, it is really, really powerful to write these down. So maybe you just pause this video here at this point and write down, okay, what are actually my rules? It is a lot more powerful to put it down on paper than you just do it in your head, because sometimes we get distracted. Oftentimes we get distracted because we have a lot of thoughts going through our heads all the time. So pause this video right now if you want to and think about what are your rules. And now that you have your rules, then you can start to think about how can I start enforcing the rules, right? How can I start setting boundaries? Enforcing sounds a little bit harsh, but you will need to expect that you start to have violators, because in the past you might have said yes to certain things and now you want to practice saying no. And this might not be super easy, and this is a process. That is why I told you should be watching that habit building video, because it is really, really important to start small. And we'll talk about a couple of different tips here in a second, but to really start small and to start integrating it, because it is a process. You're learning a completely new skill, the no skill, because over many, many, many years you have learned to always say yes. And of course, this will take a little bit of time and it will take a lot of practice to actually shift that. But when you are really clear on your rules, then that is a really good first step. And now we're talking a little bit about, okay, how do I integrate that into my life? And then how will I also communicate with violators or with people that are maybe not accepting my new boundaries? So what is really important, first of all, is to talk about how it makes you feel when you say no. And you might feel really bad. You might feel really guilty. And what I want you to take away from today's video is that it is absolutely, totally okay to feel bad here for a second, or to feel guilty and then to move on. Because you know what? The feeling will go away. But you have to feel this feeling. The feeling is an information to tell you, hey, you have been saying yes to this before. Why are you now all of a sudden saying no? Right? It's a new habit that you are building here. And so it might feel really awkward at the beginning, and these feelings will come up. I will promise you that you will feel bad. You will feel guilty in certain situations when you're starting to say no, and when you are stopping to please other people. But the feeling will go by. So remember that. Remember what I'm telling you, because this is really important to not stay stuck and then maybe to say, oh, you know what, I can actually do it. It's fine. Just give it to me. I will do it. Don't do it. Be harsh with yourself a little bit. Be strong with yourself. Setting boundaries is a skill that you have to learn, and you only will learn it by getting into action and by actually practicing it. The next step, and the thing that you will again learn in the habit building video, is to start small. Start with people that you feel a little bit more comfortable with. start with small things. Start with saying no to obvious things that, maybe you shouldn't even say yes to because nobody really expects you to say yes, but you still say yes anyway. So start small, find little situations where you can practice it and train that muscle, that no saying muscle or that setting boundary muscle. And the more you practice that muscle with those little small increments, the bigger that skill will get, and you will be more confident to also say no to bigger things, or to not just say no, but also to just question it a little bit more, right? So this was step number 2. So step number 1 was it's okay to feel bad. Step number 2 is you should start small. And then step number 3, or tip number 3, or next step on how to start enforcing your rules is to have something ready. Have something ready to communicate your boundaries. This is a really, really powerful way to practice that, because you will have to expect that somebody will violate your boundary for sure, because this is why you're setting this boundary in the first place, right? Because you have learned that people are just using you maybe, or it doesn't feel really good anymore, or maybe all of your time gets spent on other people's requests instead of taking care of the things that you need to take care of. So it is really, really important to be prepared. This is step number 3. So be prepared. I want you to think about, okay, what can I do in order to really enforce this boundary? How can I communicate this? How can I get prepared? It could be one sentence that you are preparing right now, or after watching this video, that says, this is why I am doing this, or here is how I'm going to react if a person comes to me with a last minute request. Here's what I'm going to tell them. Be prepared. Violations will happen, it's absolutely sure, and that is why you should be prepared in order to not react emotionally in that situation, but to react rationally. Because here's the next thing that is happening, that I'm seeing very often when people are starting to set boundaries. They're a little bit aggressive about it because they kind of feel uncomfortable about setting that boundary in the first place, because it's something new that they're doing. And then here comes that person that is violating their boundary, and now they're getting aggressive because they are feeling uncomfortable about doing it, but they're doing it anyway. They know, I've just watched Julia's video and I really want to be more clear on setting boundaries to stop pleasing people and taking care of myself, because at the end of the day, that's exactly why you're setting boundaries in the first place. Okay, so really, really clear 3 steps. Number 1, it's okay to feel bad. Number 2, start small. Number 3, expect violations and be prepared for them in order to react rationally instead of emotionally. Okay, so that's all I wanted to share with you in today's video. I hope you found this helpful. Give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. If you have any further questions or any comments or any success stories on how you are starting to set boundaries with people, leave me a comment down below. I'm always really excited to hear from you, and I will get back to all of the requests or all of the questions that I'm receiving. So thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you found it helpful, and I hope that you will start creating really clear rules and starting to enforce them. So good luck with that. I will see you hopefully soon in next week's video.